Okay, good morning, everyone. So I wanted to start the talk by showing you that picture, if the arrows work. Or maybe it's this one. We'll just okay, it's a bit slow. Yeah. So when we imagine a future, we wonder what will be left of us, and even more. So when I was listening to the presentation yesterday, I think about that image. The artist Maxime Mobus was clearly understood this issue by deciding to engrave Omoneta, is the name of the font, in stone, but will perhaps outlive us more than digital works. So just a few words of presentation for myself. So as my background is essentially artistic and rather than academic, I'd like to make it clear that I'm speaking from the point of view of the graphic designer, the type designer. I'm not a linguist or a graphic linguist. I'm talking about a contemporary way of thinking that inherits from a fairly recent history, 2018, that waves links with the past from the Middle Age and Antiquity, but for which certain threads have yet to be woven. I would therefore ask you to be flexible in terms of academic rigor. I adopt the research ethic of the situated point of view to develop knowledge. To do this, a few details to situate my talk and clarify from where I'm speaking as situated knowledges. I use variety of pronouns and identify myself as non-binary and now post-binary. I'm using the pronoun yel in French, so they in English, but also al, ol, ul. We will see that later. As you can see, I'm white and aware of my privilege that is given to me. I learn, study, and transmit mainly in French in Latin script from a Western-centric perspective, with all the colonial biases that implies. I come from the working class, but I study in art school, which are still places to favor a certain white bourgeois vision of the world. After more of 10 years working in my graphic design studio, Kidnap Your Designer, you can see the name here on the board. I'm teaching at the ERG, École de Recherche Graphique in Brussels. So it's a graphic research school. I recently been diplomed from master degree at University of Gender Studies. And I wanted to combine my experience in the field of graphic design, my experience with the Bye Bye Binary Collective, and the gender studies all together. That's why I'm here today. I would like to make it clear that this part of the research was not funded by any institution and that it was funded entirely on my own during 3 years. Yeah. So I am an active member of the Bye Bye Binary Collective. You can see all the names on the screen. Using language and inclusive writing as a starting point, a field for experimentation and a subject for research. The group research focused mainly on the creation of new glyphs, exploring the drawing of letters, ligature, centered period, linking elements, and symbiosis. Today, the collective is made up of a variety of profiles: artists, designers, performers, theorists, researchers. The practices of each member help to nourish the collective imagination. Here they are. But mainly it's looking like that because we are everywhere in Belgium and France. So it's like difficult to make that picture you saw just before. So BBB aims is not only to draw type, but also to raise awareness of the political implications of graphic design as a whole and of language and representation. So we are mostly known for that kind of thing. Since April 22, the Bye Bye Binary type library is online. and using the Queer Unicode initiative. I will talk about that later. And spreads fonts under OFL license, and now the Qt license. I will talk about it later too. This is the tip of the iceberg because the inventory show a whole range of typographic experiments, some of which are in the process of being published by the type library. So this is the Typothèque. But I also have done a repository on this website, and it's really more a large view of all the experimentation and typographic experimentation. And all this repository is now published in a book. I have one copy here if you want to see it real. So there is two parts in that book, like a theoretical essay with a lot of examples, and then the repository in printed. And for each font, you can see all the glyphs and the glyph sets for each of them. And from now to 26, I'm continuing the research, and I'm currently extending into the uses of these typographies in context with a funding from Art Research Fund, which aims at funding research projects in art carried out outside the scope of doctoral research. So I'm not linked to any universities. And so these typographic forms are inseparable from the context which they are created and used. We need to identify the context in which these inclusive typefaces appear in use, which media, for what, for whom, with which license, under what conditions. Since the publication of the font library in 22, we have been able to observe that the use of creation of these fonts are spreading in militant contexts, but not only, also by institutions. What is the impact of a new common encoding system like the Queer Unicode initiative? What would be the impact of integrating this proposal into over 3 font standards, such as Google Fonts, or the inclusion of our glyphs in Unicode? In this context of international presentation, I must add a preamble to my usual presentation in French-speaking context to explain a few words how the French language is particularly gender. I will go quickly into that because I'm sure you are probably aware about it. So first, about the Francophonie, just a little remarks. So in a typographic context, particularly linked into the Francophone linguistic context, let's remember that the French-speaking world is made of 88 states, and that the city of Kinshasa in Democratic Republic of Congo is the city with the most French speakers. Also, an unprecedented dynamic is taking place in French-speaking countries with a median age of less than 15 years old. Niger is the French-speaking country with the youngest population. Also Mali, Benin, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon. So with these numbers in the future, the world's French-speaking population will therefore be centered in the African continent. So about how the French language is gender, it's really like a lot gendered. So as you may know, there is of course the noun, like a friend can be un ami, une amie in a feminine way, but also for the objects like a book or a table, you have to know the gender of that object. There is like articles and determiners like le, un, ce, mon, ton. masculine way, and feminine way, la, une, cette, ma, ta. The adjectives are also genders. And here you can start to see like what kind of proposal we used to do. Also, the past participle is gendered. The pronoun, of course, and also like the conjugation, like the masculine prevailing over feminine. So if there is two persons, John and Mary are curieux, like in the masculine way. And also for the profession titles and jobs and everything, you have like also that gender way of doing. So in 2016, a school book, was published by Les Éditions Atier, using that full stop dot that you can see here. And that was a huge media crisis around that things. So that controversy surrounding this case in the media have given rise to new typographic proposals. They are part of much broader movement to reappropriate French language in gender-neutral way, a movement to begin several decades ago. So there is already existing strategy for inclusive writing and to try to avoid that masculine way of gender French language. And this is several tactics with let's say our keyboard, actual keyboard. So you probably may know, I will not take too much time on this. If you have more interest, we can talk about it. Just one thing about the three last one. Sorry, it's not super visible. Yeah, purple on black, not good idea. So the use of parentheses or hyphens or slash that you can see on the bottom of the screen, like makes the feminine form subsidiary. Like for this reason, we have been abandoned over times by militant circles, preferring the use of other orthotypographic techniques. However, parentheses are still used in many French government documents nowadays. The use of slashes was also abandoned as it indicates a division of the subject, as if it could not be both feminine and masculine. This sign also marks a clear boundary between the two genders and does not allow us to consider the entire gender continuum. So what about type design? So I already use different words like inclusive, non-binary, post-binary. I would like to more precise these three terms. So the term inclusive obviously raised the question of who is included and who is excluded. Some of the most complex typographic proposals that you will see after may be singled out as not being inclusive of people with various cognitive abilities affecting reading, as dyslexia, dyspraxia, dysorthographia, or neuroatypia. Listening to these feedbacks, and in order to claim an inclusivity that is not yet fully integrated into typeface design, the use of non-binary typography was preferred by us. For us, our goal was first to break out the binarity by proposing fluid fused agglomerated forms. The expression non-binary typography is not really satisfying for me wishing to qualify our work without using the negation. Yeah. I then introduced the notion of post-binary typography, which I will then use to develop the concept of political post-binarism. I propose that concept as a contemporary update of political lesbianism theorized in the 80s by Adrienne Rich and Monique Wittig. The concept of political post-binarism is based on similar elements of understanding. While the term non-binary is emerging more and more in the social sphere, it's not by using the negation like no, non-binary, but I believe it's possible to go beyond that epistemology of the sexual differences. I refuse to define myself by a no as a negative of the binary system. I want to see further ahead and conceive a space-time that would no longer be defined by binarity. The term post-binarism that I am proposing therefore indicates that it's possible to go beyond that binary, thanks to the prefix post from the Latin after. Political post-binarism opens the way to a new epistemology to be invented outside any binary system. By defining myself as post-binary, even though I am socialized as a woman in the imposed binary system, I am asserting my opposition to the binary assignment. I am proclaiming my right to my own self-definition as a political position of self-assertion. Oopsie. No, come on, I have to go back. Ooh. Sorry. So in type design, a lot of experimentation was made regarding that aspect of ungendered language as centered period, asterisks, diacritics. But today I will focus on ligature. So the most common compulsory linguistic ligature and optional aesthetic ligature composed here in Baskerville, these ligatures are formed automatically when the text is entered. And that's really interesting for us. And nothing new here, as a stone engraving dating from antiquity preserved here at the Lugnunum Museum in Lyon, on which ligatures are visible. As you know that, I'm sure. So here is the work. So yeah, the ligature from the Latin ligatus allow masculine and feminine forms to merge in design and symbolism. Ligature seeks to bring forms together through symbiosis, allowing gender-free, non-binary, agender, and unconfirmed identities to be included in the space of representation that is the language. So here you can see the BBB Baskerville. It's a BBB collective work with several hands, like a lot of designers work on that derivation. It's a derivation of the Baskerville published under free license, from the Atelier National de Recherche Typographique ANRT in Nancy. It was the let's say fork, derivation of the Baskerville as a particularity to be able to pass in places where knowledge is produced, like such universities, because of its authority, similar, let's say, to a Times New Roman, to make it short. Here you can see another, so yeah, I will show like different ways of making ligature. And here you can see a mix of uppercase into lowercase and vice versa. So it's also super interesting because it's come from the militant movements who use the capital E on the keyboard to make the feminine like more present. Most ligature maintain the primacy of the masculine over the feminine in the order of appearance of the suffixes. However, here you can see a Maon ligature where there is an A, a O, and an N all together, and it's not lineary anymore, but like in perspective or in layers. So that's a way of, it's like a full area of research could be developed in this way, but it's only I know for now. And this Joseph Ronde, it's the name of the font, is made with Metapost, so also linked to the presence of Donald today. Here you have an experimentation on the Times New Romance. And the ligature is very discrete, and when you read it, you can have a neutral feminine that resonates when you read it. And so, yeah, you have that fine, really thin line who's running over the letters on the top. For this character like Adelph, there is the use of epsilon, kind of epsilon, to mark feminine suffix. So Eugénie Bidault reactivates the introduction of alternative letters according to usage. So the first E here, it's not related to gender, so it's like the classic E, and you have that epsilon for the suffix, the gender suffix. This is not a new practice, as she demonstrates by recalling the typographic practices of Gian Giorgio Trissino in the Renaissance, who already made differentiated use of the open E as an epsilon and the closed E, among others experimentation. So here you can see that we can envisage forms that are more or less fused together. In the second column, you can see that the final E is included in the ligature. Here, the principle is to use a way like subscript and superscript drawing, and it's not a line on the baseline like you have, yeah. And here, something interesting, it's maybe the connection with the Middle Age, let's say, with that E here. It can be related to an old abbreviation. You probably know that's P with a underline used for père, and it's a way of like cutting letters and let's say, yeah, shorten them. So I like to talk about fork and derivation on this slide because you can see three different ways of designing like the same, it's the same fonts, but with three different inclusive glyph designs. The first one used the capital E inside the lowercase. The second one used what we use to say doublet in French, doublet, I don't know, or doublet form, with masculine and feminine under. So that second column, it's quite binary at the end. And the third one was more like using ligature and make a mix between the feminine and the masculine. And so all this is possible because of the license of the fonts. So because that first font was published on the Velveteen Type Foundry in 2018 under OFL license. And so the successive transformation made possible by the free license of the typefaces are characteristic of the pollination, I like to use that word, that is taking place and the possibilities for collective creation. So this is 3 different variations of the same fork. Like you have like, it was made with the Ballet National de Marseille. You can see the logotype of the Ballet National de Marseille here on the right. And so the first proposition was really to have a connection between the logotype of the institution and the inclusive glyphs, like to have a kind of identity for the font. And there is over derivation to something more readable here. And so regarding the use and the context and for what kind of text it's used, you can choose what kind of font you want to use. So yeah. So some cultural institution wishing to create and identify through typography itself pay, if not a complete typefaces requiring more resource, at least a fork under a free license. Commissioning a specific typeface can be an integral part of the institution visual identity. By commissioning type designers and paying them, sometimes symbolically, these cultural institutions also act as patrons of the arts, supporting creation and research. The economy of type designers is precarious. Only 26% of the typographic designs that I have, recensé, the word is not coming in English, were paid for. So only 26% of the typographic design were paid. It should also be remembered that most of the contributions were made in school context. So in 22, several cultural places in Brussels acquired forks, including the first Google font fork, like this one for the Poppins, with an initial drawing of Johnny Pinhorn. The particularity of this collaboration was the length and the in-depth involvement in the institution. The project lasted more than a year, starting with education for the in-house teams and the public, with organization of several days of lecture and roundtable. So as you will have noticed, there are several, yeah, that's the end. I pass quickly to over font fork design for a different institution in Brussels. Here you have the Sprat with an initial drawing of Ethan Nakash. And like printed and published. A theater with the Carrick that you already seen before. This is a fork of the DM song, also a Google font. And as you may notice, for each proposition, we sometimes we try the best as we can to propose a way of drawing difference. So just before you have like a cut between the characters, and here you have that lines going upper and under the characters. Yeah, just this one first. So as you will have noticed, there are several Google fonts, which will eventually raise the question of the implementation of the CUNY. You will talk about it. I will talk about it later. If this digital giant position itself by redistributing these forks. So all these institutions took advantage of the arrival of a new management team to implement post-binary typography, convinced that there was a need to mediate with the public, and the cultural institutions could play a part of this. It's not surprising to see so many institutions in theater, dance, and performances sectors taking up this issue, since these fields work directly with the representation of bodies. The performativity of bodies on stage has something in common with the performativity of typography on a page. So Belgium seems to be a good place for major cultural institutions to implement these typographical experiments. When you consider that French context, where proposed laws aims to find and withdraw subsidies from local authorities that use inclusive writing. Post-binary typography offers an interesting alternative to the French context, and there is no law proposition on using these typefaces. Not yet. Here you have the BBB-RD Futural typefaces, is a fork of the Hershey of Alan Vincent Hershey, the American physicist and mathematician who designed the typeface in 1967 for the Naval Weapons Laboratory. The decomposition of curves into connected straight lines made it possible to display them on the first cathodic tube screens using a series of coordinates. This typeface, constructed by the skeleton, has subsequently found contemporary uses, particularly from numerically controlled machine. And today it's used for the identity of l'École d'Architecture de Saint-Étienne. And here it is. And as we are in Venezia, you can see here in Venezia a post-binary character in use in the Belgian pavilion in the Giardini. So if you're still time on Saturday, I propose a visit. It's called, the character, it's called Ami Ami. It's inspired by the history of Helvetica. In 2014, Sora Sagano drew inspiration from this history to create Aileron and release it as an open source. So in 22, Mira Masson, it's a graphic design studio, appropriated and augments the character with inclusive glyphs and publish it on the by binary type library. The interesting thing about this use is that the texts are presented in French, Italian, and English, and Dutch. So the debinarization strategy are different from a language to another. Ligature are used in French, an alternative E like an epsilon for Italian, and parentheses are used in Dutch. So just the Dutch translator is clearly less progressive than the others using parentheses. Here you can see a fork of the computer modern. You probably know this fonts, was made by Donald Knuth. with Metafont. And a student in Brussels like designed this ligature for this. Unfortunately, it's not made with Metafont or Metapost, but she opened the character in glyph and just cut, copy, paste, and mixed the character together. So you saw like 3 fonts using Metafont, Metapost, like Josafont, Hershey, and Computer Modern. There is other, like also Ductus, called Ductus. But the Ductus was made entirely with Metapost. That's really interesting. And there is like a huge field for research in this. Yeah, for the Computer Modern, the student like Amy Durand used the ligature also in where it's not useful for engender the word, like in the middle of the text. And she wanted to add like poetry to a font which is used for scientific purposes. So let's start that big part. So, as you have seen before, to engender the French language, we need 43 ligature, like glyphs, in lowercase, so 86 with the uppercase. More or less the glyphs that some are missing, more or less. And to use them, because as you know, it's not on the keyboard, we use features, OpenTime features. To make it easier to enter the period centered for the people who are using a PC, because you have to call that centered period with an alphanumeric code. We have a first line of code who replace 2 classic full stop by a centered period, and then the centered period call the ligature. Yeah, here on the top you can see the code, but it's a bit so it's sub I period centered E by I underscore E. So so you type what is in green on the screen, and the result is what you see in white. And here you can see it in different fonts, and with also alternative proposition. It's also super important for us not to fix a drawing, but to propose different possibilities. Yeah, you can see here diacritics. I haven't talked about it before, but you have a little example. Before that, I just wanted to share a little video. So you can see it appearing. It's quite enthusiastic when you do it. And so we were inspired a lot by the Muffy. You probably may know that or not, I don't know. But so The MUFI is the Medieval Unicode Font Initiative. If there is any team member of the MUFI here, I wanted to be introduced to them. So this project aims to coordinate the encoding and display of medieval characters written in the Latin alphabet, facilitating the coordinated work of medievalists in the Unicode private use area, following a common mapping in this area left open by Unicode for private use. So this is the MUFI, a part of the MUFI. And here is the CUNY. So as I just said, we use the private use area of Unicode to install our fonts. So we have choose a zone, like an area in that private use area, not in the beginning, like to be sure that it will be not taken by some other things like logotype and stuff. And we decide to install us in there. So here you have the mapping with all the numbers of Unicodes and for all the ligature. And this mapping make possible to be compatible, the fonts between themselves. And this is quite new because it's from 21, 22. So between 18 and 21, 22, the 3 first years, we were just using the glyph panel to put our signs and in the text. It was not handy at all. So it's a huge improvement for us, and we are very proud of doing that because it was a lot of work. And you can find it, the whole CUNY in our Typotech. There is that area on the website, or you have all the Unicode quotes, the name of the glyph, how to call the glyph with the period centered, and examples. And so you have the list for the 43 basic characters. There is more because when you add the final E, it's another list. And we have also specific lists for the Acadam, but it's something I will talk about later. And we have also a list and encrypt that in Unicode for the words who are totally difficult to under, like frères et sœurs, like brother and sisters. We can make a specific character for that. And so it's the same for kings and queens, duc and duchess. I don't know how to say that in English. And for god and goddess, same. And so we also, there is not a lot of fonts using this, but 1 or 2, but it was important for us to include all the way of doing of each type designers to be included in the CUNY. And this year we publish a new text, and I'm checking the time. I think I'm good. It's the condition for engaging typographic use. You miss a bit the beginning, but I will read a bit. So many members of Binary came from the open source culture. So naturally, we're starting forking fonts to create derivative that would have an immediate impact by focusing on the creation of post-binary ligature without redesigning the entire fonts. You have seen also original fonts in the presentation. There are not all forks. First, we published different fonts on OFL license. This license was problematic for us in several aspects. Firstly, because of its evangelical origin. Secondly, because it doesn't take enough accounts the genealogy of creation with the reserve font name, what's the specific things. And it allows also large companies to extract knowledge from marginalized minorities. And it doesn't take into account the remuneration of creators. For all these reasons, we were led to write our own condition of use, which are not a license in the legal sense aspect of the terms, but more, let's say, an agreement. Yeah. So these conditions are based on the green bottle scale, with a scale of privilege. And so, yeah, maybe I pass a bit, but it's super interesting to go into it and to check in which level you are. But I think here all of us in the room are probably fully green bottle because we are in a university already. So this is the text. I have a copy here in French, but you can download it also online and print at home. Yeah, and so there is that scale because we noticed a problem when we were. So you can make a donation on our website for our work, and we noticed a problem. Like we noticed that some big institutions are giving nothing, and some students are giving like 50 euro. That's a huge amount for them, and so that's why also we wanted to include the that scale of donation in the condition of users. But with like, I like to read that the beginning of that paragraph, like the funds distributed under these terms of use have been designed by and for people who stand in solidarity with the struggles against cis-heteropatriarchy, white supremacy, validism, and capitalism. The use of post-binary funds is obviously not a substitute for other militant actions against this system of oppression. They are also online in French. That's why you can download it in English here if you want. And I will finish by the last thing. It's like what we just seen. Is it really like post-binarism? Is it possible to go further? Because like the yel, so the they pronoun, it's still like a masculine and feminine together. So of course we can go further. There is other neo pronoun existing, like all, al, ul, öl, and based and so we can also create inclusive glyphs for that post-binary glyphs, let's say, and with based on that pronoun all, with by binary we have made that little conversion system for all the gender suffix in French to be able to say it out loud and to be to be able to listening to a non-binary, post-binary language. And the funny fact about that, when we create that, it was to not use specific typography, but some type designers make post-binary glyphs for this academic conversion. So this is super interesting because it means that a text encrypted with the period centered can be automatically translated into that ungender language. And that's it.
So interesting. I have so many questions. My biggest one is that I see you mentioned in the beginning that we don't want to use anything inclusive because of like people with like learning disabilities and dyslexia. I feel like they would have a lot of issues with a lot of these fonts just because they're so like, is that like, because I know you're considering it.
Yeah.
Is that like something you're considering when you're making,
yeah,
when you're choosing which one is?
Yeah, so this slide is in French. Sorry, I didn't have time to translate it, but we are making like survey, and I can show you this. So we are totally considering this. We are now working on a HPL, like high potential legible. Thank you. High potential legible character font based on exchanges with a person with dyslexia and neurotypia. So this is a page of a survey we have made, the first one. The first conclusion are, to make it short, that you have to be confronted several times to the ligature to be able to read it. So it's also for us, for the people who have no problem, it's not a problem, it's different abilities. For people who have different abilities, it's the same question that people who have not. It's just like question of time and learning. It's basically the, and here is the first drawing. It's a preview, not unpublished yet. So there's a team of type designer working on that character, and is the first drawing, really first stage of work.
And then another question is, you mentioned also that you don't want to use, you're trying to move away from the parentheses and the slashes because it gives priority to the masculine. I noticed that in most of the glyphs as well, the masculine is the one coming first, or in that course, it's the one on the top. So how do we? We
tried the opposite, but it's with ligature, it's super difficult to put the final E in the middle. It's like it's a nonsense. Yeah. It's not possible to read, to use. So, but we try to avoid like the masculine on top of the feminine, like as I show with the 3 columns. So we try to avoid that, but and for the centered period centered. We also have, I didn't have time to show, but there is also experimentation who includes the dots inside the character. So that argument that it broke the lecture, it's not valid anymore because it's included inside the sign.
But I noticed that didn't happen with ma versus mo. Every time we had ma versus mo, the A came first because it was shorter.
Yeah.
So it's like, I wonder if the length of the sentence.
Yeah.
Like how long it was. Like the shorter one is always going to come first.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, very, very interesting talk. Lots to think about. I have one observation just for me, the words that ended with the E, yeah, I was actually personally reading them more feminine because when you read, you look at the start of the word and the end of the word, and then the middle is not, it's anyway sometimes difficult to read. So having that at the end was actually giving a more feminine expression to me.
Yeah, it's true. And yeah, when you read, it depends which experimentation, but there is a feminine way of reading it. Especially when they are on the same baseline. When we play with other kind of that, you can have more, an idea of mixed gender, but yeah, it depends.
So this was just an observation, but my question is, what would you envisage or recommend to use this? Would all of the text be just, even if somebody appears who is actually female or male or so, would all the text be just post-binary, or would just, I mean, people if many people are together, or people who don't want to identify as one or the other, would that just be used there, or what is your idea there?
It depends. You can really use all the way you just said. It depends of the context of the speech, the talk. It's mostly used for a collective, as you say, like people in a room. Okay, we can use this fonts. This is the minimum. Of course, for the people who are not s'identifient pas in masculine or feminine ways, for sure. But sometimes in the collective, we also play to engender everything, also objects, plants, animals, and everything. It's also interesting. It depends what you want to say, and it's also a political point of view to use this or that. They are all valid.
I have a question online, so participant would like to hear more about the relation between writing and speech. And I can complement that by the question, do you advise the use of Acadam for reading, or can we read these ligatures in any way?
It's interesting question, because all the ligature you saw, let's say, are more based on the let's say this one. We first draw it before trying to read it. We are first type designer, so we first draw and then we try to read. And for the academic system, it was the opposite. We wanted to first have something oral and be non-gender when you listen to people talking. And so it was really made for talking. But of course, you can write it. And we vote inclusively, or with now. But it's really like the two sides of the collective. We have these two practices and we mix all of this. I'm used to type with inclusive glyphs, and I'm used to talk with academ. But yeah, I mix the strategies together.
Okay, so
Then if you read the glyphs,
I can read it. You can say heureux. You can read it, and we encourage people just to try, because it's new. So you just have to, you can make a pause, you can try to, and some of them are used in the oral language before, like tous, for all the people, tous, all. Tous was already known or in oral language before we type design it. So there is also, interaction. Thank you.
There are many questions, but I
one last question.
I wonder, your strategy is sort of combining the feminine and the masculine there, and in the history of languages with inflections becoming non-inflected, what usually happens if you compare English and French, the inflections such as your X and S that indicate feminine and masculine are actually, they usually get dropped in time. And it seems to me that you're preserving binarism. Is it not the case that you're preserving the binarism because you have used the same X and S in that example?
Yeah.
By combining it or merging it or doing something, that's not how uninflected languages or non-binary languages like English
That's
and
why I
Chinese.
talk about the academ at the end, because it's going further. It's going with the all pronoun. It's not il or elle. It's like really and by the past there is also the al pronoun existing to say al pleut, it's raining. It's not new neither. It's come also from the past, but it has to be reactivated. And I think for now people are not ready for a non-gender French language. So it's quite maybe in between strategy till new times in the future and a real post-binary future.
One thing that is uniquely French that might help here is because most of your final consonants unpronounced in the language, coming back to the question about speech, you want to change people's speech and thinking, you know, it's just to get rid of them and have
Yeah. Yeah.
you.
It's existing.
without the
It's
X from the
it's
S.
it's a use. It's the first slide, I think. I don't know if I'm going back, but there is the use of the asterisk, who I used to cut the end of the words, and it's really used for a trans-feminist movement for ages. So I haven't. Because it's not a new thing, I didn't present it today, but it's totally existing, and it used the asterisk. But that's the problem is with the oral speech, you are not hearing that it's ungender. For example, for ami, if I say ami with an asterisk, I can't hear it's ungender. With the academ, I can say amil, and then it is something new, and voila.
I don't know what you do in that, the final gendered suffixes in French, you can just drop them into that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you know, if you want to really get radical,
yeah, yeah. But it's existing.
maybe it's.
Yeah.
We have a lot to talk.
Thank you for your questions.